Morning, lovelies. What if they don't confess? Let's talk about it. Jesus. Coffee. So yesterday we talked about forgiveness is the greatest expression of love, right? So if you have a individual that has hurt you and doesn't come to you and confess and ask for forgiveness, what do you do with that? Well, we've talked about it many times in the past, but I want to reiterate it because it's important, right? So, good morning, Felipe. My very, very wise young brother. Phenomenal grades, kid. If somebody hurts you and doesn't come to you and apologize and confess what they've done and ask you for your forgiveness, what do we do with that? Well, let me go over some passage in Romans 5:8. Because remember, we forgive as we've been forgiven, right? So we know that Christ forgave us by going to the cross for us, right? So I want to discuss that. But I want to go through a passage that really speaks to that, right? It's Romans 5:8. Love Romans. So Romans 5:8 says, but God demonstrates his own love toward us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Then verse 9 says, much more then, having now been justified by his blood, we shall be saved from wrath through him. So while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So we hadn't confessed our sins, but Christ had already forgiven us. What did he say on the cross? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So while we were still sinners, he went to the cross and he died for us. We hadn't confessed yet, and yet he died for us. So if we are to forgive as we are forgiven, then I guess that means that, good morning, Eddie. What's going on, my brother? We're to forgive before that individual comes to us and seeks forgiveness. We take that to the foot of the cross and we lay it there and we forgive them. Forgiveness isn't dependent on the other person. It's dependent on us. It's obedience to him. Right? So our obedience is never dependent on another individual's obedience. If they don't come to you and seek that forgiveness, if they don't confess that they wronged you, we don't turn around and withhold our obedience to him based on their lack of obedience to him, right? Because if we withhold that and we go, well, he hadn't confessed, he or she hasn't confessed, so therefore I'm not going to forgive because they haven't confessed, so I don't need to forgive yet. No. We forgive as we've been forgiven because we were still sinners when Christ died for us. And we forgive as we have been forgiven, right? Don't miss that, guys. That's why Casting Crowns, Love Moved First. This is my testimony song. Because I didn't move first. He did. He moved first. He moved first in my life. He moved first in my heart. He came after me when anybody else would have left me at my worst. And I was at my worst. He didn't wait. He didn't wait for me to come to him. He says, I'm right here. Arms wide open. I'm right here. I'm right here, son. Come on. Love moved first, right? Love moved first. What's the greatest expression of love? We talked about it yesterday. Greatest expression of love is forgiveness. And if love moves first, guess what? That means forgiveness needs to move first. If you've been wronged, somebody's got to go first. Otherwise, that relationship stays broken. Somebody's got to move first. Somebody's got to make that first move. And when somebody makes that first move, reconciliation happens in the relationship, which is no different than Christ moving first on our behalf. Reconciliation happens in that relationship. Our relationships, guys, are just microcosms of our relationships with him. They're just horizontal versions of our relationship vertically. Because when somebody wrongs us, we wrong him, right? We sin against him all the time. Yet he forgave us and he moved first. He was the first one to make that move. No different in our relationships. I've been blessed to have a wife that is phenomenal. And God's shown me that through her. That is a gift of hers, is forgiveness. But in that, and through her, he's taught me how to forgive. It's getting easier, but still a challenge. It's a challenge every day, but it gets starting to get easier and starting to learn. Yes, even this donkey can learn. So we forgive as we've been forgiven, and we forgive even when they haven't come to us. So you know what happens when they come to you and they say, hey, you know what? I was wrong when I did that. I was so wrong. Say, you know what? They ask for your forgiveness. Look, you were forgiven long ago. You're able to tell them they were forgiven long ago. I forgave you a long time ago. They've already been forgiven. Just as Christ had forgiven us before we had accepted that forgiveness. Because we have to accept that forgiveness, right? That acceptance of forgiveness is Ephesians 2, 8 and 9, right? For by grace you have been saved. Good morning, Janice. For by grace you've been saved through faith. Not of your own. It's a free gift of God. Not of works, so that no man may boast. Right? It's a gift. Just like forgiveness is a gift. When that person chooses to accept that forgiveness by coming to you and confessing, then they'll receive that forgiveness. But it doesn't mean you wait to give it. You give it just as he had already given us that gift. When we place our faith, we choose to accept that gift. It's the same. Greatest expression of love. So, I love you guys. I know he loves you like crazy. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about a box of rocks. Love you guys. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever Dad wants to talk about.